The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of the small apartment on the outskirts of town. Li Wei sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of bills before him. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he calculated the numbers, for the third time, hoping somehow they would change. They didn't. Li Wei glanced toward the sound of soft piano notes coming from the living room. His daughter Ming played with a gentle touch that belied her 20 years of age. Her fingers danced across the keys of the old upright piano that had once belonged to her mother. Though blind since birth, Ming navigated her world with remarkable grace, especially when it came to music. "That sounds beautiful," Li Wei called, out trying to keep his voice steady despite the worry gnawing at his stomach. The music paused. "Thanks, Dad. I think I finally got that middle section right." Ming's voice carried a natural joy that had somehow survived all their hardships. Li Wei pushed aside the bills and walked to the living room. The apartment was small but clean, with furniture that had seen better days. The piano, though, gleamed. From regular polishing, the one luxury Li Wei insisted upon maintaining. Ming's unseeing eyes seemed to look through him as she smiled in his direction. Her long, dark hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her hands rested lightly on the piano keys. "Your mother would be so proud of how you play," Li Wei said, sitting beside her on the bench. "You say that every day," Ming laughed, bumping her shoulder gently against his. "Because it's true every day." Ever since his wife had passed away 5 years ago from cancer, Li Wei had done everything in his power to keep Ming's life as normal as possible. He had once been the most sought-after music teacher in their community, but as he dedicated more time to caring for Ming, his student numbers dwindled. The medical bills from his wife's illness had emptied their savings, and the special programs Ming needed had pushed them further into debt. "I have good news," Ming said, her fingers finding the keys again and playing a cheerful tune. "Mr. Zhang from the community center called. He wants me to perform at next month's festival. He's even offering a small payment." Li Wei's heart sank. The community center, where he had borrowed money from the owner's brother 3 months ago to pay Ming's medical bills after she had developed a serious ear infection that threatened her hearing. The brother who had been sending increasingly threatening messages about repayment. "That's wonderful," he managed, patting her hand. Ming stopped playing and turned toward him. Though she couldn't see his expression, she had always been perceptively attuned to the nuances in his voice. "What's wrong, Dad? You sound worried." Li Wei sighed. He had always been honest with Ming about their situation, but tried to shield her from the worst of it. "Just the usual bills," he said. "Nothing for you to worry about." Ming frowned. "I'm not a child anymore. If we're having money problems, I should know." Before Li Wei could respond, his phone buzzed with a message. He pulled it from his pocket, his stomach clenching when he saw it was from Huang Tao, the loan shark who had been hounding him for weeks. "Final warning. Payment by Friday, or we take the piano." Li Wei quickly pocketed the phone. "Just spam," he lied. Ming resumed playing, but her melody had shifted to something more melancholy. "I've been thinking," she said carefully. "Maybe I should stop my special classes at the center. They're expensive and I already know enough to get by." "Absolutely not," Li Wei said firmly. Those classes were teaching Ming to navigate the world independently, something that had become increasingly important as he grew older. "Your education comes first, always. But, no buts. I'm still your father, and I make the decisions." His tone was harsher than intended, and he immediately regretted it when Ming's hand stilled on the keys. "I just want to help," she said quietly. Li Wei softened, putting his arm around her shoulders. "I know, my little songbird. And you do help, every day. Your music and your smile give me strength." Later that afternoon, while Ming napped, Li Wei sat on their small balcony and made calls to former students, offering discounted lessons. Most declined politely. His final call was to an old friend who worked as a chauffeur for some of the city's wealthiest residents. "I need work, Liang." "Anything at all," Li Wei said, desperation edging into his voice. "Times are tough everywhere," Liang replied sympathetically. "But there might be something. My employer, Mr. Zhao, mentioned needing someone to teach his niece piano. He pays well." Hope flickered in Li Wei's chest. That would be perfect. When can I meet him? He's very particular, Liang cautioned. But I'll mention you. He's hosting a small gathering at his home tomorrow evening. Perhaps you could come and bring a recording of your playing? Or better yet, a recording of Ming. I've told him about her talent. Li Wei hesitated. He had always been protective of Ming, reluctant to use her abilities for his gain. But they were running out of options. I'll bring both, he decided. The next evening, Li Wei stood at the gates of the largest home he had ever seen. Zhao Huang's mansion sprawled across manicured grounds, its windows glowing with warm light against the darkening sky. He clutched a small USB drive containing recordings of both his and Ming's playing. Liang met him at the entrance. Remember, Mr. Zhao is a businessman first. He appreciates directness and dislikes wasting time. Inside, the house hummed with quiet conversation as elegantly dressed people mingled with drinks in hand. Li Wei felt painfully out of place in his best shirt, now several years old and slightly frayed at the collar. Zhao Huang stood by a grand piano in the main room, a man in his 50s with a commanding presence despite his average height. His clothes screamed of wealth, but it was the sharp intelligence in his eyes that made Li Wei nervous. So you're the music teacher, Zhao said when Liang introduced them. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. I've brought recordings of my playing as well as my daughter's. She is exceptionally talented. Something flickered in Zhao's expression. Your daughter. She is the blind pianist Liang mentioned? Li Wei nodded, surprised that Liang had shared that detail. Interesting. Come to my study. In a room lined with books and expensive art, Zhao connected the USB drive to a computer. They listened in silence to Ming's playing, a complex piece by Chopin that she had mastered last year. Zhao's expression remained unreadable, but his fingers tapped lightly against his desk in time with the music. When it ended, he looked at Li Wei with renewed interest. Remarkable control and emotion. How old is she? 20, sir. And completely blind since birth? No formal conservatory training? Yes to both. We couldn't afford. Zhao held up a hand, cutting him off. I understand your financial situation. It's precarious. Li Wei flushed with embarrassment. Had Liang told him everything? I might have a proposition for you, Zhao continued. Not as a piano teacher, but regarding your daughter. An uneasy feeling settled in Li Wei's stomach. My daughter is not for hire as entertainment, if that's what you're suggesting. Zhao laughed, a sound without humor. Nothing so common. I'm a collector, Mr. Li, of beautiful and rare things. He gestured to the room around them filled with priceless objects. Your daughter's talent is exactly the sort of unique treasure I appreciate. I don't understand. I have no family, no heirs. What I do have is more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. Zhao leaned forward. I would like to offer your daughter my patronage, complete financial support to develop her talent. The finest teachers, opportunities to perform, a comfortable life. Li Wei's heart raced. It sounded too good to be true. And what would you want in return? Zhao's smile didn't reach his eyes. Marriage. The word hung in the air between them. You can't be serious, Li Wei finally managed. I'm always serious about business, Mr. Li. And this would be a business arrangement, make no mistake. Zhao opened a drawer and removed a folded paper. Your debts would be paid in full. Your daughter would want for nothing, and you would receive a monthly stipend for the rest of your life. He slid the paper across the desk. It was a bank statement showing a sum of money that made Li Wei's head spin. This is what I'm prepared to transfer to you immediately upon agreement. Li Wei stared at the number, thinking of all their problems it would solve. Then shame washed over him. I can't sell my daughter. Not selling. Arranging a beneficial match, one that would secure both your futures. Zhao's voice hardened slightly. Consider your alternatives carefully, Mr. Li. I understand the people you've borrowed from are not known for their patience. As if on cue, Li Wei's phone buzzed with another threatening message. Take a day to think about it, Zhao said, rising to indicate the meeting was over. My offer expires tomorrow night. Walking home through the dark streets, Li Wei felt as though the weight of the world pressed down on his shoulders. How had his life come to this moment considering something so unthinkable? But as he unlocked the door to their apartment and heard Ming playing her beloved piano, the piano that would be taken away in just 2 days, he wondered if there really was a choice at all. Ming sat on the edge of her bed, running her fingers over her favorite book of piano compositions. The raised dots of the Braille notation were comforting under her touch, familiar and unchanging in a world that suddenly felt very uncertain. "Dad?" she called out, hearing him pass by her doorway. "Can we talk now?" Li Wei had been unusually quiet since returning home last night. When he'd kissed her forehead this morning, she'd smelled expensive cologne on his clothes, something he never wore. He'd been avoiding her questions all day, saying only that he had an important matter to discuss later. His footsteps paused, then reluctantly entered her room. The bed dipped as he sat beside her. "I met someone last night," he began, his voice oddly formal. "A very wealthy and influential man named Zhao Huang." Ming's hand stilled on her book. "The businessman who owns half the buildings downtown? Mr. Zhang mentioned him once, said he funds the symphony." "Yes, that's him." Li Wei took a deep breath. He heard your recording, the one I made last month of your Chopin piece." Something in his tone made Ming sit up straighter. "And?" "He was extremely impressed, said you have extraordinary talent." Li Wei paused, then added in a rush, "He wants to become your patron." Ming's heart jumped. A patron? Like the wealthy benefactors who supported musicians in the stories her father used to read to her. "What does that mean exactly?" she asked cautiously. "It means he would provide for your musical education. The best teachers, opportunities to perform, everything you need to develop your gift fully." Li Wei's voice brightened with forced enthusiasm. "You could attend the conservatory we always dreamed about." Ming frowned. Their financial troubles were no secret to her. "What's the catch? People don't just hand out money, especially rich people." The silence stretched uncomfortably before Li Wei answered. "He has proposed marriage." The words didn't make sense at first. "Marriage? To whom?" "To you, Ming." Li Wei's voice was barely above a whisper. Ming's mouth fell open. That's ridiculous. I've never even met him. How old is he?" 53. 50. Ming stood up abruptly, her book falling to the floor. "I'm 20, and he doesn't know me. Why would he want to marry someone he's never met? Someone who can't see?" Li Wei's voice cracked as he replied. "He says your talent moved him, that he wants to nurture your gift and provide you with everything you could ever need." Ming paced her small room, counting steps as she always did. 5 steps forward, turn, 5 steps back. "This doesn't make sense. Rich men don't marry. Blind girls from poor families. What does he really want? A companion, perhaps. Someone to bring music into his home." Li Wei retrieved her fallen book, placing it gently back in her hands. "Ming, listen to me. Zhao can offer you a life I never could. Security, opportunity, comfort." "I don't care about those things," Ming said stubbornly, though that wasn't entirely true. She did sometimes dream of a life without constant worry about money, without having to count every yuan. "Our debts." Li Wei started, then stopped himself. Ming stilled. "What about our debts?" Li Wei sighed deeply. "The men I borrowed from, they're coming for the piano." Friday. Ming clutched her book tighter. The piano had been her mother's. It was the one thing that connected her to the woman she barely remembered. "How much do we owe?" she asked, though she already knew it must be far more than they could possibly pay. "Too much," Li Wei admitted, "but Zhao has offered to clear everything. All of it, gone in an instant. And he would provide a monthly stipend for me as well." The realization hit her like a physical blow. "So this isn't really about my music at all. It's about money." "No." Li Wei took her hands. "Your talent is genuine, Ming." He truly was impressed. "The financial arrangement is secondary." But Ming could hear the lie in his voice. "Still, The thought of losing their piano, her piano, was unbearable. And what would happen to her father if these men couldn't get their money? She'd heard stories of debtors being beaten, even killed. Would I have to live with him immediately? She asked quietly. Yes, after the ceremony. Ceremony. The word felt strange in her mouth. How soon would this happen? He suggested next. Week. Li Wei's voice was heavy with shame. But Ming, you don't have to do this. We'll figure something out. Maybe I can get more students, or you've been trying for months. Ming interrupted gently. We both know there's no quick solution. She sat back down, her mind racing. Tell me honestly, what happens if I say no? The silence told her everything. Finally, Li Wei spoke, his voice breaking. I don't know how we'll keep the apartment, or the piano. And these men, they're not patient. Ming nodded slowly, a strange calm settling over her. All her life, her father had protected her, sacrificed for her. Perhaps this was her chance to protect him in return. I'll meet him, she said finally, before I decide. 3 days later, Ming sat across from Zhao Huang in his mansion, her hands folded nervously in her lap. Her father had described the opulent room to her in whispers before Zhao arrived. The crystal chandelier, priceless paintings, furniture that probably cost more than their entire apartment building. Your playing is even more beautiful in person, Zhao said after she'd performed a piece on his grand piano. His voice was deep and smooth like expensive liquor. You have a rare gift. Thank you, Ming replied cautiously. My father says you want to help develop my talent. Among other things. She heard him stand and move closer. I admire beauty in all its forms, Miss Li, and talent such as yours deserves to be nurtured. And in return, you want marriage. He chuckled, seemingly amused by her directness. I want a companion, someone of substance in my home. My peers collect art and antiques. I prefer living treasures. The word collect made Ming's skin crawl, but she kept her expression neutral. I would have freedom to pursue my music? Of course. The finest instructors, access to any instrument you desire, opportunities to perform when you wish. He paused. And your father would never worry about money again? Ming tilted her head. May I ask you something personal, Mr. Zhao? Please. Why someone you don't know? Someone who cannot see? Surely there are many beautiful, accomplished women who would marry you willingly. She heard him sit down beside her on the piano bench. Beauty fades. Social climbers bore me. I've had my share of both. He touched one key on the piano, a single clear note hanging between them. What you have, this gift, is timeless. And your blindness means you see the world differently. You listen. You feel. In my experience, those are rare qualities indeed. His words were eloquent, almost poetic, yet something beneath them felt rehearsed, calculated. Still, Ming could find no obvious lie in his voice. I'll need time to consider, she said. Of course. He stood again, but not too much time. My offer expires in 2 days. That night, Ming lay awake long after her father had gone to bed. She could hear him through the thin walls, restless and worried. The thought of marrying a stranger terrified her. But the thought of losing everything, their home, her piano, possibly even her father if these dangerous men came for him, was worse. Morning, she had made her decision. The wedding was a small, hurried affair at Zhao's mansion the following week. Ming wore a dress borrowed from the housekeeper's daughter, slightly too large but made of finer fabric than anything she'd ever owned. There were few guests, no family on Zhao's side, only a handful of business associates who eyed Ming with barely concealed curiosity. You look beautiful, her father whispered as he guided her through unfamiliar rooms. His hand trembled against hers. Is everything all right? Ming asked, sensing his distress. Yes, just emotional. His voice sounded strained. I never thought your wedding day would come so soon. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. Ming repeated vows in a clear voice, determined to face this new reality with the same courage. She'd faced her blindness all her life. When the official pronounced them married, Zhao's lips brushed against hers briefly, a cool, formal kiss that held no warmth. Afterwards, there was a small reception. Ming sat beside her new husband, picking at food she couldn't taste, responding politely to congratulations from strangers. Zhao kept a hand lightly on her arm, his touch proprietary rather than affectionate. "It's time to go," he said eventually, helping her to her feet. Reality crashed over Ming. This was really happening. She was leaving her home, her father, everything familiar. "Can I have a moment with my father first?" she asked. Zhao agreed, and Li Wei led her to a quiet corner. As soon as they were alone, Ming threw her arms around him. "I'll be fine," she whispered fiercely. "Don't worry about me, my brave girl." His voice broke as he held her tightly. "I'll visit soon, and your new life will be wonderful. You'll see. I love you, Dad. I love you more than anything in this world." He pressed something into her hand, a small carved wooden bird, a childhood gift from her mother. "Never forget who you are." Then Zhao was there, gently extracting her from her father's embrace. As she was led to the waiting car, Ming felt the cool evening air on her face and wondered what her new home would really be like once the doors closed behind her. In the car, Zhao sat beside her in silence. The engine hummed softly as they pulled away. "Your father received his payment," he said finally. "All debts cleared as promised." Ming nodded, clutching the wooden bird in her palm. She had made her choice. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same determination that had carried her through life's darkness. Behind them, standing alone on the mansion steps, Li Wei watched the car disappear into the night, tears streaming down his face. Li Wei stumbled into his empty apartment, the silence crushing him like a physical weight. The door clicked shut behind him, and he stood in the darkness, unable to bring himself to turn on the lights. What was the point? The light of his life was gone. His hand found the thick envelope in his pocket, Zhao's final payment. Inside was enough money to clear all his debts with plenty left over. The price of his daughter. The thought made his stomach heave. He lurched to the bathroom, barely making it before emptying the contents of his stomach. Afterward, he splashed cold water on his face and caught sight of his reflection in the mirror. The face staring back was that of a stranger, hollow-eyed, ashen, unrecognizable. "What have you done?" he whispered to his reflection. In the stillness of the apartment, memories ambushed him from every corner. The living room where Ming had taken her first hesitant steps as a toddler, her tiny hands outstretched for balance. The kitchen table where he'd taught her to read Braille, her fingers moving with growing confidence across the raised dots. And the piano, her piano, sitting silent now, its presence an accusation. Li Wei moved to it as if in a trance, lifting the polished wooden lid. Ming's sheet music was still there, the pages marked with her special system of tactile notations in the corners. He touched them gently, remembering how proud she'd been when she'd developed her own method for remembering complex passages. The memory was too much. With a cry of anguish, Li Wei slammed the piano lid closed. He couldn't bear these reminders, couldn't live with the evidence of what he'd lost, what he'd sold. A sudden terrible clarity came over him. He knew what he had to do. First, he went to the kitchen drawer and found a notepad and pen. Sitting at the table, he began to write, his hand shaking at first, then growing steadier as the words poured out. "To whoever finds this," he began, "my name is Li Wei, and I have committed an unforgivable act." He wrote everything, the mounting debts, the threats, his desperate meeting with Zhao. He detailed the true nature of the arrangement, how Zhao had made it clear that he wanted a submissive, dependent wife who wouldn't question his business dealings or frequent absences. "He has no interest in her music," Li Wei wrote bitterly. "That was merely what attracted his attention. What he wants is someone who will be completely reliant on him, someone he can control absolutely. And I, her father, who should have protected her, delivered her into his hands. When he finished the confession, he read it over once, then set it aside. There was more to be done. Li Wei moved through the apartment with grim purpose, gathering everything that reminded him of Ming. Her childhood stuffed rabbit, worn thin with love. Photo albums filled with pictures from happier times. The special ceramic mug she always used for tea, molded to fit her hands perfectly, books of poetry he'd read to her. All the birthday cards she'd made him over the years, each one a treasure of raised paper designs and heartfelt messages in carefully formed braille. He carried everything to the small concrete patio behind their building. The night air was cool, the sky clear and filled with stars Ming had never seen. Using old newspapers and a small bottle of lighter fluid he kept for emergencies, Li Wei built a careful pile. Before lighting it, he took one last look at each item. The stuffed rabbit still smelled faintly of Ming's childhood scent. The photos captured her smile through the years, always radiant despite the darkness she lived in. Each object was a piece of her, a piece of their life together. "I'm sorry," he whispered, striking a match. The flame caught quickly, climbing through the pile of memories. Li Wei watched, tears streaming silently down his face as the fire consumed everything. The heat scorched his skin, but he didn't move. Back. Some small part of him felt he deserved the pain. When there was nothing left but ashes, Li Wei returned to the apartment. It felt emptier now, scrubbed of Ming's presence. Only the piano remained, too large to burn, too precious to destroy. Besides, it wasn't truly his to dispose of. It had been his wife's, then Ming's. Never really his. Li Wei went to the bathroom and opened the medicine cabinet. Among the various bottles was one of sleeping pills, prescribed during the dark months after his wife's death when rest had been impossible. He'd only taken a few back then, preferring to face his grief head-on rather than mute it with medication. Now he tipped the remaining pills into his palm. There were many, enough to ensure he wouldn't wake to face what he'd done. He filled a glass with water and carried both to the kitchen table, placing them beside his written confession. Sitting down, Li Wei stared at the pills. Was this the answer? The coward's way out? Perhaps. But he couldn't see any other path forward. The thought of continuing to live, accepting Zhao's monthly payments, benefiting from what he'd done, it was unbearable. Just as he was about to raise the pills to his mouth, a knock came at the door. Li Wei froze. It was past midnight. Who would be visiting at this hour? The knock came again, more insistent this time. "Mr. Li, are you in there? It's Mrs. Chen from next door." Li Wei hurriedly swept the pills into his pocket and went to the door. Mrs. Chen stood in the hallway, her kind face creased with concern. "I saw the fire in the back," she said without preamble. "And I've been worried about you since I heard about Ming's marriage. Such a sudden thing. I brought you some dumplings." She held out a covered dish. No one should be alone after giving away their only child. The simple kindness nearly broke him. "Thank you," he managed, accepting the dish with unsteady hands. "Mrs. Chen peered past him into the dark apartment. "Have you been sitting in the dark all this time? That won't do." Without waiting for permission, she bustled past him and began turning on lights. "There, much better. Now where shall I put these dumplings? You need to eat something. You look terrible." Li Wei stood helplessly as his elderly neighbor moved around his kitchen, chatting as she found plates and utensils. The pills felt heavy. In his pocket. "Mrs. Chen," he began, not sure what he was going to say. She turned to him, her eyes unexpectedly sharp. "I know what it's like to lose everything, Mr. Li. After my husband died, I thought there was no point in going on." She gestured to the pocket where he'd hidden the pills. "I considered the same solution you're thinking of." Li Wei stared at her, speechless. "But I was wrong," she continued, her voice gentle now. "Life goes on, even when we think it can't. Even when we don't want it to." She placed a plate of dumplings on the table, carefully moving his confession letter aside without reading it. Eat, then sleep. Things will look different in the morning. No, Li Wei said, his voice breaking. You don't understand what I've done. I understand more than you think. Mrs. Chen guided him to a chair. My husband was not a good man, Mr. Li. He did terrible things. But even the worst mistakes can sometimes be fixed. Could his mistake be fixed? Li Wei doubted it. But as he mechanically began to eat the dumplings, the first food he'd had all day, he felt a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. Mrs. Chen stayed with him, talking about nothing important, until he had finished eating. Then she collected his plate and headed for the door. Promise me you won't do anything foolish tonight, she said, fixing him with a stern look. Li Wei hesitated, then nodded slowly. After she left, he returned to the table and looked at the confession he'd written. The truth was there, in black and white. He folded it carefully and placed it in an envelope which he addressed simply to Ming. Then he went to the bathroom and flushed the sleeping pills down the toilet, watching them disappear in a swirl of water. He wouldn't take the easy way out. Not tonight, at least. Instead, he would face what he had done. And somehow, if there was any way possible, he would make it right. Li Wei returned to the living room and sat at Ming's piano. Slowly, his fingers found the keys and began to play a lullaby he had composed for her when she was born. The melody filled the empty apartment, each note a promise, each chord a prayer for forgiveness. Outside, in the apartment next door, Mrs. Chen heard the music and smiled sadly. She'd seen the flames in the backyard, watched from her window as Li Wei burned his daughter's belongings. She'd recognized the signs of a man preparing to end his life, but the music told her he would live another day. For now, that would have to be enough. As dawn broke over the city, Li Wei was still at the piano, playing as if his life depended on it. In a way, perhaps it did. Ming stood by the window in her new bedroom, feeling the morning sunlight on her face. After 7 days in Dao's mansion, she still couldn't think of it as home. The room was spacious, bigger than our entire apartment, her father had whispered when he first described it to her. But it felt like a beautiful cage. Her fingers traced the edge of the windowsill. Below, she could hear gardeners working, their occasional voices drifting up. Beyond them was a high wall that surrounded the entire property. She'd discovered this during her careful explorations, guided by a young housemaid named Jun, who had been assigned to help her navigate. Miss Ming? Jun's soft voice came from the doorway. Mr. Zhao asks if you'll join him for breakfast. Ming turned, forcing a smile. Of course. Thank you, Jun. The maid took her arm, guiding her through the maze of hallways. Jun was the only person in the household who treated Ming normally, without the mixture of curiosity and pity she sensed from everyone else. In the dining room, Zhao was already seated. Ming could smell his cologne, sharp and expensive, before he spoke. Good morning, my dear. Did you sleep well? Yes, thank you. Another lie. She'd barely slept at all, still struggling to adjust to the unfamiliar surroundings and the sound of Zhao's breathing in the connecting room. Their marriage remained unconsummated, for which Ming was deeply grateful. Zhao had been surprisingly respectful in that regard, maintaining separate bedrooms. We have time to grow comfortable with each other, he'd said on their wedding night, patting her hand as if she were a child. Ming took her seat, her fingers finding the table setting with practiced ease. She'd always been good at adapting to new environments, a necessary skill when you couldn't see. I have meetings all day, Zhao said as servants placed food before them. But I've arranged for your first piano lesson this afternoon. The instructor comes highly recommended. Ming's heart lifted slightly. Thank you, I've been looking forward to playing again. Yes, well. Zhao's tone cooled noticeably. The piano room is rather far from my study. The sound carries less there. The implication was clear. Her music was to be contained, controlled, not unlike herself. I understand, Ming said quietly. Good. She heard the rustle of a newspaper. Oh, and we'll be hosting a dinner tomorrow night. Important business associates. I'd like you to wear the blue dress my assistant selected. Will, you want me to play for your guests? Ming asked hopefully. A pause. No, I don't think so, not yet. Your playing is still too raw. Perhaps after more lessons. Ming's appetite vanished. She pushed her food around the plate, trying to hide her disappointment. For days, she'd been asking to play, only to be put off with various excuses. Now, she had lessons but apparently wasn't good enough to perform. May I call my father today? She asked. It's been a week. I've sent a car for him, Zhao replied, surprising her. He'll be here this afternoon. A short visit, of course. I'm a busy man, Ming nodded, grateful for even this small kindness. She missed her father terribly, worried about how he was coping alone. Later, in the piano room, Ming ran her hands over the grand piano. It was magnificent, far superior to her old upright. When she played the first notes, the sound was so rich and perfect that tears sprang to her eyes. The instructor, Mr. Wang, was elderly and formal. Your technique is impressive for someone with no formal training, he said after listening to her play. But there is much room for improvement. Ming threw herself into the lesson, grateful to be doing something familiar. For 2 hours, she forgot her strange new life and lost herself in the music. Afterward, as June was guiding her back to her room, Ming heard voices from Zhao's study as they passed. The land acquisition must be completed by month's end, Zhao was saying. Those peasants have delayed us long enough. Use whatever means necessary. But sir, another voice protested, some of them have nowhere to go. The compensation offered is more than generous. Zhao cut in coldly. I don't care if you have to drag them out. That land will be mine. Ming quickened her pace, disturbed by the hardness in her husband's voice. It was a side of him she hadn't heard before, calculating, ruthless. In her room, she sat quietly, turning over what she'd heard. What kind of man had she married? What other sides of him would emerge once he tired of being patient with her? A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Your father is here, Miss Ming, June announced. Ming hurried to the entrance hall where Li Wei waited. The moment she heard his familiar footsteps, she rushed forward into his embrace. Dad, she breathed, holding him tightly. I've missed you so much. My Ming. His voice sounded strained, different. How are you? Are they treating you well? Yes, she assured him, though it wasn't entirely true. Everything is fine. Come, let me show you the piano room. As they walked, Ming quietly described her new life, trying to emphasize the positives, the beautiful piano, the garden she was learning to navigate, the promised lessons. Li Wei listened silently. When they reached the piano room, he closed the door behind them. Ming, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, I need to tell you something important. Before he could continue, the door opened. Ah, the touching family reunion, Zhao said, his voice pleasant but with an undertone Ming had come to recognize as warning. I hope you're enjoying your visit, Mr. Li. Yes. Thank you for allowing it, Li Wei replied stiffly. Perhaps Ming will play something for us, Zhao suggested, though it wasn't really a question. Ming sat at the piano and began to play, choosing a piece her father had always loved. As her fingers moved across the keys, she sensed the tension between the two men. When she finished, Zhao applauded politely. Lovely. Now, Mr. Li, my driver will take you home. I have business to discuss with my wife. But we've barely had any time, Li Wei protested. You'll visit again soon, Zhao said smoothly. Next week, perhaps. Ming hugged her father goodbye, feeling him slip something into her pocket as they embraced. Stay strong, he whispered. After he left, Zhao's manner changed subtly. Your father seems unwell, he remarked. Troubled. He misses me, Ming said simply. Well, he'll adjust, as will you. Zhao's hand came to rest on her shoulder, his grip slightly too firm. Now, about tomorrow's dinner. There will be questions about our unusual marriage. You will tell people you're very happy, of course. Of course, Ming repeated, feeling the weight of his hand like a shackle. Later, alone in her room, Ming retrieved what her father had placed in her pocket. It was a small, folded piece of paper. Her fingers found a few braille dots punched into it, a crude message. Find letter in lining of coat. Heart racing, Ming felt along the coat she'd brought from home, the one hanging in her closet. In the lining was a sewn pocket she'd never noticed. Inside was a folded envelope addressed to her, but not in braille. She couldn't read it. Ming sat on her bed, unsure what to do. She needed someone to read it to her, but who could she trust? The next evening, as Zhao's business dinner began, Ming sat quietly beside him, wearing the blue dress as instructed. The conversation flowed around her. Business deals, market forecasts, occasional polite questions directed her way about how she was enjoying married life. Your husband tells us you're quite the pianist, one guest remarked. I enjoy playing, Ming replied carefully, sensing Zhao's attention on her. Yet he keeps you hidden away, another voice said. No performances yet? Such talent should be shared. In time, Zhao said smoothly. My wife is still adjusting to her new surroundings. A new voice entered the conversation, younger, with a slight accent. Mr. Zhao, I was hoping to discuss your latest development project for a piece I'm writing. The displacement of those farming families has caused quite a stir. Ming felt Zhao tense beside her. Mr. Chen, this is hardly the venue for such discussions. Of course, forgive me. The man sounded unrepentant. Perhaps a private interview later this week? My assistant will contact you, Zhao said dismissively. Later, as guests mingled after dinner, Ming stood by the wall, feeling out of place. Someone approached, the footsteps unfamiliar. Mrs. Zhao? It was the same young man from dinner. I'm Chen Lin, from the City Tribune. May I ask how you're finding married life? There was something in his tone, a genuine curiosity rather than the polite disinterest of the other guests. It's an adjustment, Ming said carefully. I imagine so. He lowered his voice. I knew your father, actually. I interviewed him once about music education in underserved communities. He spoke of you often. Ming's heart quickened. Did you speak with him recently? 3 days ago, in fact. Chen's voice dropped even lower. He seemed troubled, mentioned he had concerns about your welfare. Ming hesitated, then made a decision. Mr. Chen, I have a letter I can't read. Would you? There you are, darling. Zhao's hand clamped onto her arm. You're needed for photographs. As Zhao led her away, Chen called after them. I'll be in touch about that interview, Mr. Zhao. Perhaps next time I could hear Mrs. Zhao play as well. Ming felt Zhao's fingers dig into her arm. That man is trouble, he muttered. Stay away from him. But for the first time since her wedding, Ming felt a flicker of hope. Someone was asking questions, someone was watching, and her father's mysterious letter might hold answers she desperately needed. 3 weeks had passed since the dinner party, and Ming had not heard from the journalist again. Each day fell into the same pattern: breakfast with Zhao, piano lessons with Mr. Wang, lonely afternoons in the garden with Jun, and quiet evenings where Zhao spoke of business while Ming listened silently. Her father had visited twice more, each time seeming more agitated than before. During their last visit, he'd whispered, "Be patient. Help is coming." But Ming was beginning to lose hope. The letter remained unread, hidden in a small box where she kept her few personal belongings. She'd considered asking Jun to read it, but the risk seemed too great. If the maid reported back to Zhao, the consequences could be severe. Ming learned this lesson when Zhao discovered her playing the piano outside her scheduled lesson times. I've asked you not to play when I'm working, he'd said, his voice dangerously calm. Yet I find you here, deliberately disobeying me. I'm sorry, Ming had replied. I thought you were out at meetings. His hand had gripped her wrist then, not hard enough to bruise but tight enough to show his strength. My dear, You seem to misunderstand your position. Everything in this house, including you, belongs to me. Your music is a privilege I allow, not a right you possess." After that, Ming was careful to follow his rules exactly. The gentle, patient man from their early days of marriage had vanished, revealing someone controlling and cold. He hadn't hurt her physically, but his threats hung in the air between them, unspoken but clear. One afternoon, as Ming sat in the garden feeling the late autumn sun on her face, Jun approached hurriedly. "Miss Ming," the maid whispered. "Someone left this for you at the service entrance." She pressed something into Ming's hand, a small digital voice recorder. "He said you would know what to do with it." Before Ming could ask questions, Jun hurried away, clearly frightened of being caught. Ming slipped the recorder into her pocket, heart racing. Later, alone in her bathroom with the shower running to cover any sound, she pressed play. "Mrs. Zhao, this is Chen Lin." The journalist's voice was low and urgent. "I've been investigating your husband's business dealings and found disturbing information. The land he's acquiring belongs to farming families who have owned it for generations. Those who refuse to sell are being threatened. 2 homes have mysteriously burned down." Ming's hands trembled as she listened. "But that's not all. I spoke with your father at length. He gave me a letter to pass on to you, but I couldn't get it into the house. Instead, I'll read it now." There was a rustling of paper, then Chen began reading. "My dearest Ming, by the time you hear this, you will have been married to Zhao for over a month. I pray he has been kind to you, but I fear otherwise. The night of your wedding, I did something terrible. In my shame and despair, I burned all your belongings and nearly took my own life." Ming gasped, covering her mouth to stifle the sound. "I was stopped by our neighbor's kindness, and I realized I couldn't abandon you. Instead, I began investigating Zhao. What I discovered horrifies me. His business empire is built on corruption and intimidation. The charm he showed us was merely a mask. I've learned he's done this before. Married vulnerable women, isolated them, then discarded them when he tired of them. His first wife vanished overseas with a substantial payment after 2 years. The second was committed to a mental institution after a nervous breakdown. I've given this information to Chen Lin, a journalist I trust. He's building a case against Zhao, but needs more evidence. If you can safely find documents in his home office, it could help. But please do not risk yourself if it's dangerous. I will never forgive myself for what I've done, but I promise I will not rest until you are free. Your loving father." The recording continued with Chen's voice. "I've been working on an expose of Zhao's business practices for months. With your father's help, we're close to publishing, but we need more evidence. If you can help, leave a note with Jun for me. If not, I understand. Either way, know that people are working to help you." Ming sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. Her father hadn't abandoned her. He was fighting for her, and this journalist was risking his career, perhaps even his safety, to help. For the first time, Ming allowed herself to feel the full weight of her situation. She wasn't just unhappy. She was trapped in a marriage with a dangerous man who viewed her as property. That night at dinner, Ming struggled to maintain her composure. Zhao seemed distracted, irritable. "There's a problem with the land acquisition," he said abruptly. "Some journalist is stirring up trouble, asking questions." Ming's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that. It's nothing I can't handle." His voice hardened. "People who oppose me tend to regret it." 3 days later, Ming's father arrived for his scheduled visit. When they embraced, he whispered, "They're going to publish the story tomorrow. Be ready." Before she could ask what he meant, Zhao joined them. "Mr. Li," he said coldly, "I'm afraid I must cut your visit short today. An urgent matter requires my wife's attention." "Of course," Li Wei replied, his voice steady. "I'll see you soon, Ming." The way he emphasized soon told Ming everything she needed to know. That night, unable to sleep, Ming made a decision. Carefully, she slipped out of bed and felt her way to Zhao's study. During her weeks in the mansion, she had memorized the layout of every room, counting steps between furniture, noting the texture of different carpets under her feet. The study door was locked, but Ming had come prepared. Earlier that day, she had taken the hairpin Jun used to secure her bun, now remembering tricks her father had taught her for when they accidentally locked themselves out of their apartment. She worked the pin into the lock. It took several tense minutes, but finally, the lock clicked open. Inside, Ming moved cautiously to Zhao's desk. Her fingers found his laptop still warm. He must have been working late. Ming had no way to access its contents, but beside it she found something better, a digital voice recorder, similar to the one Chen had sent her. Zhao used it to dictate notes and messages to his assistant. Ming pressed buttons until she heard the most recent recording start to play. Zhao's voice filled the silent room. Regarding the Chen Lin problem, I want him stopped before publication. Use the usual methods. The brake line approach worked well last time. Make it look like an accident. The same goes for the old man, Li Wei. He's become a liability. Horror washed over Ming. Zhao was planning to kill both Chen and her father. With shaking hands, she found the button to stop the recording, then carefully removed the memory card. This was the evidence Chen needed. She was feeling her way back to the door when the light suddenly flicked on. What an interesting development. Zhao stood in the doorway, his voice like ice. My obedient blind wife sneaking around like a thief. Ming clutched the memory card in her palm. You're planning to kill my father. And now you've complicated matters considerably. He stepped toward her. Give me the card, Ming. No. She backed away, bumping into the desk. You have nowhere to go, Zhao said, moving closer. No one to help you. You're blind, helpless, entirely dependent on me. That's why I chose you. Now give me the card. Ming heard the creak of floorboards as he took another step toward her. In that moment, something broke inside her, the fear, the submission, the pretense. I may be blind, she said, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. But I'm not helpless. She threw the heavy paperweight from his desk in the direction of his voice, hearing a satisfying thud and cry of pain. Then she ran, counting steps. In her head, 12 to the door, turn right, 20 to the stairs. Behind her, Zhao shouted for security. Ming raced down the stairs, praying she wouldn't fall. At the bottom, she turned toward where she knew the front door would be. Hands grabbed her from behind. Mrs. Zhao, stop. It was one of the security guards. He's trying to kill my father, Ming cried, struggling. Please help me. What nonsense is this? Zhao appeared, his voice controlled despite the situation. My wife is unwell. Take her to her room. I have proof. Ming held up the memory card. He recorded his plans to murder a journalist and my father. A new voice cut through the chaos. I think we'd all like to hear that recording. Ming recognized Chen Lin's voice, and he wasn't alone. There were multiple footsteps, the sound of a camera shutter clicking. What is the meaning of this? Zhao demanded. How did you get in here? Your maid Jun let us in, Chen replied calmly. Along with these police officers, we've been building a case against you for months, Mr. Zhao. Corruption, bribery, intimidation, and now apparently, conspiracy to commit murder. The security guard's grip on Ming loosened. She felt someone else take her arm gently. Ming. It was her father's voice, choked with emotion. I'm here. You're safe now. The next few hours passed in a blur. Police questioning. Chen explaining how they'd been waiting nearby for any opportunity to enter the mansion legally. Zhao's angry denials turning to stony silence when the recording was played. By dawn, Ming sat in a police station, her father beside her, giving her statement. The memory card had been taken as evidence. Zhao was in custody, and Chen was already writing the story that would destroy Zhao's empire. I'm so sorry, Li Wei said for the 100th time, clutching Ming's hand. Can you ever forgive me? Ming was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, she finally said honestly. What you did was terrible. You saw me as something you could sell when things got difficult. Li Wei's sob caught in his throat. But, Ming continued, you also fought to save me, at great risk to yourself. That counts for something. She squeezed his hand. We'll need time to rebuild trust, to find our way forward. Whatever you need, Li Wei promised. I'll spend the rest of my life making this right. 1 year later, Ming sat at a piano on a small stage, her fingers dancing across the keys. The audience in the community center listened in rapt silence as she played a piece she had composed herself titled Finding Light. In the front row sat her father, now running a small music program for disadvantaged children. Beside him was Chen Lin, whose exposé on Zhao had earned him a prestigious journalism award and helped free dozens of families from Zhao's land grabs. Zhao himself was serving a lengthy prison sentence for multiple crimes, his empire dismantled, his wealth largely seized by the government. As Ming played the final notes, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The pain hadn't disappeared. Some wounds were too deep to fully heal. But she had found strength she never knew she possessed, built a new life from the ashes of the old, and discovered that even in the darkest times, light could find its way through. The audience burst into applause, and Ming smiled, bowing toward the sound. Her blindness had once made her a target for a predator, but now it was simply one part of who she was, a survivor, a musician, a woman who had faced darkness and emerged stronger for it.